Tensura What If? Silver Timeline by CBCTEBAS Chapter 61 Carrera vs Sea Serpent. Carrera-sama stopped destroying worlds. Lendi was stressed by Carrera, her master's, every action. Lendi was a dragon that was serving as Arcana's justice, and a subordinate of Carrera, who was currently riding on his back as they flew to another world. Lighten up, Len, there's nothing we could have done for them. Carrera laughed as she casually threw another nuclear strike magic at the next world. There were no survivors left anyway. But, I would suggest giving up. A boss who was riding on his back as well recommended to the poor dragon. Stressing over master's actions is the same as stressing over breathing. Lendi and a boss have become good friends over the past years of them working together. Not to mention they were drinking buddies, and a boss is Lendi's person to complain about their master. Oh, Carrera stared off into the vast space. Someone strong just appeared there, she pointed, and the other two steeled themselves for a fight. Someone that their master would call strong is someone they could not take lightly. They arrived at a large water planet. Someone rose from the sea. A water deity? Lendi commented as he saw the appearance of the enemy. A water serpent with a female upper torso and snake lower torso, yet the end of her tail is connected to the sea. It was Tiamat, the sea serpent. She looked towards them as they hovered above her planet of water. She pointed both hands towards them, and a large geyser with her at the top fired towards them. And other geysers also fired near her. They also had a humanoid form to support Tiamat. You guys handle the small fries. Carrera jumped off Lendi's back and imbued her fist with magic, aiming at Tiamat. Tiamat using the geyser that she was riding in. Several streams of water with sharp pointed edges are directed towards Carrera. She, with her fist, received the attack and continued the fight with Tiamat. Roger. Understood. Lendi dived into the other enemies with a boss in his back. A boss similarly jumped off his back to his master with his fist also in the ready. Crimson impact. Few of the oncoming enemies are destroyed by the wave of power from Abbas's fist. He saw Lendi making a U-turn and going in the opposite direction. He was confused by his action but did not question it, as he knew that the dragon had something more important than this to do. A boss made a platform using his mana, and jumped through them to defeat the other enemies. Lendi was going away from the water planet. He was not abandoning them or anything like that. Though sometimes he wishes to do so on his master, but nonetheless, he is serious about his job. I believe I sensed you. Here, Lendi fired a flaming breath towards a certain asteroid floating in space. Someone jumped out of the asteroid, a female with light blue hair tied in a ponytail. Her eyes give off an apathetic gaze that shows no interest in anything, mixing well with her dull expression. Orochi of Ice. Spying is not very proper, miss. Lendi sped towards her, aiming his claws to her body. She dodges by a hair's breadth before having her palm touch his wings. Then spot she touched started to freeze, and it began to spread to the entirety of Lendi's wing. This is nothing to my burning justice. Lendi using his innate energy melted the ice by firing a breath ahead and passing through it. The ice soon began to melt and returned to its normal state. Lendi saw Orochi creating several ice spears half his dragon size, all aimed at him. Seeing his gaze, she fired an ice spear toward him with precision and speed. Realizing that the attack could harm him, he dodged and destroyed some with his breath. His breath was not able to melt the attack, showing its toughness, and was able to harm him. His body was impaled by two of the attacks on his body. Luckily for him, it was not a deep wound and the attack was shrunk down by his breath. He sighed seeing his injuries. He was not one to be careless on his enemies, especially ones that have the potential to harm or kill him. When did I grow soft? Was I desensitized by master? Lendi reflected, remembering his yellow-haired master. He was once a dragon that thought of nothing but upholding justice, until one day the Cardinal of the South, Carrera, came and wanted to take him as another one of her pets, as she calls them. A boss was a calm man who was a warrior at heart. He did not mind serving under a master stronger than him. He shows no sign of complaining about Carrera. If there were something, it would be the training and games his master does to both him and the poor victims of her boredom. Lendi was different. He was defiant from the very start, and even now shows it in how he speaks to her. But he understands that what she is doing is for the betterment of everything around them. Even if some selfish actions are added to them most of the time, He thinks he knows that his master would not disobey the Silver God's orders. He only ever saw the Silver God once. It was when he was introduced as part of their group called Arcana. It was his first time seeing his master following someone's orders obediently without complaint, or the fact that she was respectful and was listening intently. He saw how all of those on her level was doing the same. In that moment Lendi had bottomless respect for Rimuru the Silver God for reigning them under him. I give this prayer to the one above. Mold this body to one that is useful to you. Lendi started to glow, his body shrinking in size. Then, a person appeared from where he originally was. A man with platinum hair and dragon wings. On his left hand holds a scale, on the other he holds a sword. Let us finish this. Lendi flew forward to Orochi, who received the attack by making a sword of her own with ice. The two were locked in a sword fight. Orochi knew that she was inferior to Lendi in terms of swordsmanship, which is why she blocked one of his attacks and her sword exploded into ice shards. She backed off to gain some distance before recreating the ice spears from before, firing at Lendi, who was recovering from the surprise attack earlier. Law of Equilitas. Lendi raised his scale that was in his left hand forward. The scale showed one side to be lower than the other, then it glowed for a brief second and the scale started to return to being equal. And as they returned to their original position, ice spears started to materialize in front of Lendi, the same size, the same amount, and the same quality. They were fired, blocking Orochi's attack. The attack collided with each other, all of them bursting into tiny pieces as they were countered with the same thing. Anything you throw, I can bring it back to you. Such is equality. Lendi swiped his sword towards Orochi, who was running from him. Then, she turned toward where Tiamat was as if she was hearing something calling to her. She looked back to Lendi and thought for a second before firing off a large number of ice spears and bullets. Lendi would of course use his scale to counter the barrage of ice attacks. Then he would soon realize that Orochi was gone and that he was surrounded by thick fog. The fog was cold, very cold in fact that he felt his skin freezing. And they indeed were freezing. His entire body was covered in ice, not only outside, but the inside of his body. That fog that he breathed in was attacking him inside as well. This won't work on me, Lendi shouted as he forcefully unfreezed his entire body. Hey, not bad, Carrera complimented as she saw the wound she received from Tiamat. Using her magic, she has been firing at Tiamat's body multiple times by now. Yet no matter what, it always returns to the female humanoid form. Is that even your real body? Not talking? Carrera prepared a nuclear strike magic like the one she used on the worlds on their way here. The explosion was coming directly towards Tiamat. Noticing the attack coming towards her, Tiamat, using the pillar of water she was riding in, swallowed the attack into the planet, using a large tidal wave that could end civilization. The explosion made a giant eruption that could be seen from space, and yet the planet did not get destroyed. The water was able to absorb the majority of the impact, and the explosion was only those that it could not contain. The water that flew from the explosion was manipulated by Tiamat. She used those that were thrown high up to rain down on not just Carrera but to a boss as well. Pointless. Carrera smiled as she used her aura to protect herself and her body. She also invoked a large fire attack that evaporated the nearby water that was coming her way. Please don't taunt her, master, Abbas said as he tried to escape the barrage of water bullet rain that was aiming at him. Thanks to being with Carrera for a long time, he was able to unlock the ability to manipulate the energy from his body outside of it. It was not magicules, but for convenience's sake, anything that is an inferior version of magicules is called mana. While a bit rough around the edges, Abbas could manipulate his mana to take forms like platforms and shields among other things. However, he could not comprehend how to convert mana into elements like fire or water. He was still able to manage to regulate it at a higher speed inside his body, which Carrera told him was akin to body strengthening and steel strength. He jumps through the platforms that he creates in front of him with a small layer of mana covering his skin. His control may not be the best, but the quality of his mana is very potent. A large column of water appeared in front of him. A water dragon's head burst out, firing a water breath at him. Abbas dodged to the side and adjusted his mana to his feet, kicking the dragon in the head hard enough that it flew off the pillar of water. Several pillars of water surround him, and from there not only water dragons but serpents and some form of blob of tendrils are in them. Carrera used gravity collapse on Tiamat, resulting in the humanoid water serpent being compressed, destroying the form of Tiamat and removing her from the sea. The remains were fired off into the far end of space. Well, that confirms it, your real body is somewhere there. Carrera had her right hand on her hip as she saw Tiamat materialize another body from the sea. What should I do? Then, as if struck by a genius idea, she had a wicked grin on her face before flying to space. Bah, leave the area for a bit. Understood. A boss did not even have to question her order. The moment the phrase, leave the area, is stated, that would mean his master is planning on blowing everything up. It has been proven on many accounts that he or Lendi would want to admit. Absorb it then. Carrera spread her arms wide, then the surrounding area started to glow. Nuclear flame. A large attack, its brightness almost resembling the sun with its heat and glow. It dropped to the large water planet, intending to evaporate all its waters if not destroying the planet. Tiamat, seeing the attack coming her way, dived back down to the water. Scared, Carrera, seeing her enemy retreat, taunted. Then, 5 dragon-like heads burst out of the sea. Their size was enough for each to be about 10 kilometers in width, not to mention the length of their head and neck. The 5 heads looked at the large ball of flame coming their way. They all opened their mouth at the same time and breathed out large amounts of water. Most of the water was turned to steam before even reaching the ball of flames. But then, the water breath of the dragons turned into ice. They had a better chance of weakening the attack of the yellow primordial than simple seawater at the very least. And they succeeded. The flames lost about 50% their original size. The attack finally hit and the damage was done, yet it was smaller than expected. Though even then, Carrera would have already concluded that a full-powered nuclear flame would not have finished the job. Carrera-sama, another enemy is here. She is an ice user and probably the one that supported your enemy. Lendi landed near Carrera, informing her of what to expect. Carrera looked towards him. Oh Len, Carrera finally realized. Since when did you have a human form? Lendi palmed his forehead. Now is not the time for that. What should we do? The enemy is still alive. What is more, they banded together. Just one of them was a tough battle. What shall we do, master? A boss joined in, standing on the opposite side of Carrera. Carrera looked at them both with a grin. We'll blow it all up. Of course, we are. Lendi rolled his eyes, but he had a smile on his face as if he was more than fine with it. The enemy this time is strong after all. It is necessary to eliminate this type of threat before they become too much. What is the plan, master? A boss was already preparing himself for what his master had thought up as a finishing attack for this battle. Buy me some time, I'll do something that'll blow everything up. Carrera, after saying those words, flew out to space, far enough that they could not see her with their eyes. Well. Lendi looked at his comrade. Orders are orders, what do you want to do, Ba? I want to try my Jin form. A boss warmed up as he prepared himself for the strain in his body. Lendi had a face of displeasure. Did you not just have a coma of 3 months last time you used it? He could still recall that exact moment. That would be because I was not used to it yet, and because I fired out everything I had at Carrera-sama. It was used on a mock battle, or as Carrera called it, a training exercise. A boss was on the brink of death. He normally does not use his Jin, but on rare occasions. He unconsciously unleashed it to fight Carrera, who took it as a challenge and fought even more seriously. I think it was mostly Carrera-sama's fault for your coma. Well then, I do my best to buy you some time. Lendi rushed into the planet, dodging the upcoming pillars of water that were sharpened like a lance frozen aimed at him. He used both weapons in his hands to counter every one of them. A boss seeing this had a small smile on his face, grateful for such an understanding and patient friend like Lendi, though it is probably because of Master that he became patient. Tiamat saw the Platinum Man flying towards them with extreme speed. She turned to Orochi beside her, who nodded her head. She then opened her palm and fired thousands of water bullets faster than the speed of sound. Following her action, Orochi, using the sea with the assistance of Tiamat, made large but thin needles of ice that could barely be seen by the naked eye. They number in the hundreds and are all aimed at Lendi. You think that numbers would overwhelm me? Lendi, using his scale again, copied the attack that they made to counter every one of them, to the exact size and location. Lendi noticed that some of the attacks managed to reach him. Hey, so they are more over the potency of what I could copy. Orochi has been experimenting with her attacks since long ago when it was only her and Lendi fighting. Slowly but surely, each of her attacks had different levels of quality, some were more durable than the rest. She was testing if with the large number of attacks she could push the scale to the limit. She was right, not everything could be copied perfectly from the original. Each of the copies is not perfect and has some 0.0% of irrelevant differences. Since they are not perfect copies, she only needed to see the upper limit of the quality that Lendi could make. What are the conditions for this to happen? Does it only have to be extremely powerful? No, because she already tested that. Does a large number of attacks work? No, she tried that as well, with Tiamat in tow. Then a combination of the two with slight variation? Yes, it showed some results. While not powerful, the fact that the scale has a weakness to be taken advantage of is beneficial for them. So what? Lendi leaned back his head and pushing his face forward, a large fire breath was fired towards Tiamat and Orochi. Law of Patent, Flames of Agni. It was heat that could melt and evaporate anything that touched it. He had seen the flames of Agni before and had strived to copy that heat. Tiamat made a tidal wave that turned into a cyclone that covered the area where they were, Orochi helping in by creating an ice barrier. A boss was watching from afar the clash that was happening. He is strong, it is time for me to get serious as well. A boss took out the sword that he had stored up, holding it in front of him with two hands, with his eyes closed like he was praying. Spirit of hunting and nobility. I command thee. Be clad in my body. Dwell in my body. Change my body into a great jinn, Barbatos. His hair lengthened and turned silver, his ears turned pointy, and the sword in his hand morphs into something more akin to a trident. His legs looked like the feet of feline animals and were covered in armor. Whoa! Ba finally succeeded in controlling his jinn form. Carrera spoke proudly as she stood close to a red giant star. I should start as well. Carrera has been finding a nice star to use for her magic. She has been learning of different things from all the universe that she governs, especially those that bring her much more destructive potential. Rimuru-sama, I will borrow some of your magicules. Carrera prayed to herself, sensing the magicules of the trillions of followers of Rimuru coursing through her. Gravity collapse, global cascade. Several hundred of gravity collapse are all over the giant dying star, forcing all of its gravity towards its center, shrinking it in size. Ha ha ha, to think that I could create such a large explosion like this without consequence. Rimuru-sama truly does bless his subordinates with what they wish, though. Not enough, get smaller. Carrera felt that the star was nearing its limit and was close to exploding, but not yet. The yellow primordial still wanted it to be much more powerful. More, 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 Carrera repeated as if possessed by the incarnation of destruction. No, she was indeed the incarnation of absolute destruction that brings ruin wherever she sets foot. The power to destroy worlds was not enough. She needed to make sure that the enemy would not survive even in the smallest chance. Grow smaller, much smaller, smaller, so you can bring ruin to my enemies. Evolution to Demon Lord confirmed. Harvest Festival will now begin. Confirmed. Unique skill. Destroyer evolved into the ultimate skill. King of Ruination Agaras, successful. Abbas was done with his preparation. Len. Abbas shouted the name of his friend as he raised his trident weapon. The mana that he had coursed through it, materializing a large sword made of mana. It glowed white and its length is more than a few kilometers long. Bard Longi News. Tiamat was alerted by the attack. She looked at Orochi, who was also looking at the attack. Tiamat placed everything she had towards decreasing the damage the attack would cause, especially since it had the potential to reach her true body, which was in the center of the planet. The sword made out of mana was used to carve a large slash towards the body of water. Sorry. Orochi apologized to Tiamat before leaving into a portal she had opened. Tiamat looked at the fleeing Orochi in disbelief before preparing to fight for her survival. As she was preparing herself, she knew that an attack like that could not be repeated with the cost of energy. In fact, she could see the platinum-haired one carrying his unconscious comrade away. Regaining confidence, she plans to chase after them with her remaining seawater. Here it goes. Abyss core collapse. Carrera directed the course of the explosion, fired it all towards Tiamat's way. The attack was faster than the speed of light and destroyed everything in its path. Eventually it reached Tiamat, who finally realized that Orochi did not run from the sword, but because she sensed this attack coming. She did not even feel herself die, showing how fast and how strong the attack was that it destroyed her without time to resist. Ha ha ha. Carrera laughed with her hands on her hips. She had beads of sweat flowing from all over her body. That was close. We could have all died if I didn't have my skill evolve. She continues to laugh. Lendi, who was watching, wanted to complain but did not have the time as the aftermath of such an attack was coming. He, carrying a boss, returned to their main HQ for the southern direction. Carrera following behind, leaving the universe to die off from her attack. Normally it would only damage a few galaxies for a normal supernova, but with the addition of Carrera's magicule that she got from Rimuru, and with her making sure to compress the star beyond its limit, even pulling in nearby stars to make it more powerful. This result was of no surprise to her, but only her.